This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
To another edition of the Wednesday night Shiur, Parshas Lecha. So Parshas Lecha speaks about the mitzvah of Bris Milah. And before we start, we just want to let everybody know, Mitzvah Hashem, in a couple weeks, starting November 11th, the Wednesday night Shiur will be moving over to Cedarhurst, New York. Of course, you're all invited. If anybody wants transportation, right now we have 6 spots available in our weekly transportation from Congregation Torah MS at 7:50 p.m. There and back. 6 slots available. If anybody wants to ride, let us know. Also, good news is that we hope to be able to return here to Torah MS monthly, once a month on Thursday evenings. So keep posted for that shiur. Okay, Parshas Lecha. Also, we want to make special mention of Gedalia Schwartz in Norfolk, Virginia, who's also sponsoring tonight's shiur, in honor of the Shiurim coming to Norfolk, Virginia, and we wish all of our viewers there much bracha v'hatzlacha. Okay, I think now we could start. The mitzvah of Bris Milah. Mitzvah of Bris Milah is a very important mitzvah. It's one of the only mitzvahs I say that if one fails to perform, there's a chi of kares. And it also is a mitzvah you can only do during the day, like the pasuk says, Uvayayim hashmini yimal b'sar alasai, on the 8th day, and at night, you circumcise the foreskin. Now, more than that, we don't have any information in terms of when during the day to do the Bris Milah. Morning, afternoon, midday, brunch, lunch. We don't know exactly. So the Gemara brings down a Bris and Masechta Pesachim. Look at number 1. Kol hayom kuloi kasher l'milah. The whole day is technically a good time to do a Bris Milah. You could do Milah any time during the day. 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 1 p.m. You could do it the whole day. Just Elishes reason makdimim lemitzvahs. Zrizim, people who do mitzvahs with energy, with enthusiasm, they do it as soon as possible. A famous rule, a well-known principle, Zrizim makdimim lemitzvahs. By the way, where do we know Zrizim makdimim lemitzvahs from? From Avraham Avinu by the Akedah. It says, Vayashkem Avraham Ba'boiker. Avraham got up early in the morning. Okay, very nice. Well, let me tell you a little story. One of the all-time great Gedolei Yisrael, one of the great Achronim, was a man by the name of Rabbi Eiger. Rabbi Eiger wrote, of course, Shalos Teshuvos Rabbi Eiger. He wrote Chidushim on Shas. He wrote Hagois on Shulchan Aruch. He wrote footnotes on every page of Gemara, many pages of Gemara, Gilyon Hashas. Rabbi Eiger, one of the greatest of the Achronim. Rabbi Eiger had a son-in-law, the Chassam Sofer. Yeah? Rabbi Eiger's son-in-law was the Chassam Sofer. Actually, the Chassam Sofer was married to a woman, and she passed away. And the Chassam Sofer was a bachelor now, and he's looking to get married. And someone suggested to him the daughter of Rabbi Eiger. Chassam Sofer said, "The daughter of the Gadol Hadar. I would love to marry the daughter of the Gadol Hadar. But why would the daughter of a Gadol Hadar want to marry an Amoritz like me?" So they went to Rabbi Eiger and they proposed the shidduch. We have a great shidduch for your daughter, the Chassam Sofer. Rabbi Eiger said, "I would love the Gadol Hadar, the Chassam Sofer, to marry my daughter. But why would the Gadol Hadar want to marry the daughter of an Amoritz like me?" So the Shadchan said, "I have a great idea." He went to both of them. He said, "I have a great shidduch. One Amoritz to the daughter of an Amoritz." And that's how the shidduch was. By the way, apparently the daughter of Rabbi Eiger did not get a great look at the Chassam Sofer during the engagement period. And at the wedding, she looks at him and she says to her father, "Tati, he's so old! He's so old!" So the father gives her a push. Quick! He's not getting any younger. And they got married. And from that zivuk came the Ksav Sofer and Rav Shimon Sofer. As we're going to see, Rav Shimon Sofer was the Rav of Mattersdorf and later Krakow. That's from the Chassam Sofer. Rabbi Eiger had a son, Rav Shlomo Eiger. On many pages of Shulchan Aruch, you have Gilyon Marsha, Rav Shlomo Eiger. Now, you should know, this family, one of the most illustrious families in Klal Yisrael, they were no Hasidim. Furthest thing from Hasidim. However, Rabbi Eiger's son, Rav Shlomo Eiger, had a son, Rabbi Leibele Eiger. Rabbi Leibele Eiger was a Go'in Olam, was a brilliant mind. And he became very close to Hasidus. To the point where, if we could say such a thing, he converted. He became a chassid. Legend has it that Reb Shlomo Eiger was so upset and so angry that his son became Hasidish, that he sat Shiva. He sat Shiva. I heard from a very reliable source. Okay, and back in those days, it was a very big divide. It was a very big divide. Well, Reb Leibele Eiger, I don't know religiously, but for business, it was much better to become Hasidish. Why? Because beforehand he was just a rabbi. How much are you going to make as a rabbi already? But when you become a rebbe, it's a different ballgame. And he had many, many Hasidim. He had thousands of Hasidim in Lublin. One of the most successful rebbes. But he was a holy man. Rabbi Leibele Eiger was a ish kadosh v'tar. To the point where, to prepare for a davening, he would prepare for hours and hours and hours and hours for Shachris. And to prepare for a Bris Milah, he would meditate, he would contemplate, he would go into some kind of trance and commune with God for hours and hours and hours, to the point where he started doing Bris Milah after Chatzos Hayom, after midday. And rumor even had in a meditative state, connecting with God before he would perform Bris Milah. Now, you should know, he had another very interesting practice, aside from delaying the Bris Milah, and that is, whenever he was the moyal, he was also the sandak. He would do both simultaneously. But in fact, this was the minhag of his illustrious grandfather, Rabbi Eiger. Rabbi Eiger, it's brought down in the Shas Chuvas Minchas Elazar and Chelek Aleph Siman Memches. The Minchas Elazar deals with the issue: how are you allowed to be a sandak and a moyal at the same time? Why not? Well, obviously, to be a sandak, you have to be sitting down. Now, are you allowed to circumcise a kid sitting, or do you have to be standing? It's a Eiger, grandson of Rabbi Eiger, becomes Hasidish. He becomes a follower of the Talmidei Baal Shem Tov, and he begins to adopt many of their practices, including preparing many hours for Tefillah, preparing many hours for Bris Milah. And the question is, of course, since the Gemara tells us that even though technically speaking you can perform Bris Milah the entire day, but nevertheless it's preferable to do it as soon as possible, as early as possible. This practice of Rabbi Leibele Eiger caused a great bit of controversy and raised many eyebrows. There were many Gedolim, many Go'inim who were very unhappy with this practice. Now, like we mentioned, the fact that he was the Moyal and the Sandak, that was already the practice of Rabbi Eiger himself. But regarding postponing the Bris Milah after Chatzos, to do it right before Shkia, that was considered very problematic by many Go'inim. And in fact, in the year 1865, the following broadside appeared on every wall in Europe. The following Kol Koire, the following proclamation. You know, nowadays you go down Main Street, you see Chazak, this guy's speaking, that guy's speaking, this concert, that. Well, this declaration, proclamation appeared on every wall in Europe. This was a declaration that was enunciated by a great Goin, Hagoin Rabbi Yeshua Heschel Ashkenazi, the Av Bezdin of Lublin, and it is published in a responsa in Shas Teshuvas Shem V'She'eris L'Nefesh Chaya. In the Sefer Shem V'She'eris L'Nefesh Chaya, it prints this broadside, this proclamation, this poster that appeared literally on every street corner in Europe. The first time it was published was in 1928 in a Torah journal, and but this was what went up, and this took place in the year 1865. Says Rabbi Yeshua Heschel Ashkenazi. Take a look on the bottom of the page, number 4. Roi roisi, I have seen the roya haminhagim agruim, the terrible custom in our holy kahila. And this is a custom that really tries to undermine basic halacha. And says Rabbi Yeshua Heschel, look, I would mind my own business. What do I need to meddle in other people's affairs? But look, I'm the rabbi. And if something bad happens in a shul or in a city, and the rabbi doesn't speak up, he will be punished. It's on his shoulders. And therefore I have to fulfill my responsibility and protest. Number 1, what in the world are these rabbis doing, postponing Bris Milah until late in the day? You know how to do that. The Gemara says, Zrizim Makdimim L'mitzvahs. You have to do it as soon as possible. How could these people? It's a halacha and shulchan aruch and Yeridiyas and Reish Samach Beis. When it comes to bris milah, people like to do bris milah. Bris, more people will come, so let's make it later in the day. No! Bris milah, early as possible. Number 2, we know Moshe Rabbeinu was criticized for not circumcising his son right away, and because of that, he endangered his life. So if Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest man who ever lived, could not delay bris milah, who does this rabbi think he is that he's delaying bris milah by sitting there communing with the one above? What's he doing? Number 3, this is a very important halacha. What if the bris milah is Friday? Now the halacha is you're not going to get married on Friday. If the meal is going to be on Friday, you're not allowed to have an unusual meal, an extraordinary meal that you're not allowed to, that you usually don't eat during the week. You can't eat on Friday. You can eat a regular meal, but not more than usual, right? Some reason it comes to Friday lunch, you see people, all of a sudden they have 3 slices of pizza and French fries. Why? It's a hara. It's the one meal a week that you're not supposed to have an unusually large meal. Because you're supposed to go into Shabbos hungry. Now, again, you're allowed to eat on Friday. Not only allowed to eat breakfast, you're allowed to eat lunch. From 3 hours in the day, 9 hours into the day, 3 hours after Chatzos, it's a mitzvah not to be Kaveh Suda. It's not an Avera to be Kaveh Suda. It's just, again, an unusually large meal, you're not allowed to eat the whole Friday. A regular meal from 3...
Got the red light on.
I need batteries. From 3 hours into the day, one should not have a regular meal on Friday. From Friday. So anyway, so that's the reason why one should not get married on Friday if they're going to be having a Sudas Erusin on Friday. You're not going to get married Friday. What about bris milah? Now, bris milah, you don't have a choice. If it's the 8th day, it's the 8th day. You can come on the screen. It's good for business.
It might scare people.
Okay. Okay, we're back. It's a very controversial shiur, the tent. The electricity can't really handle what we're saying now. But, so the halacha is, now bris milah, it's the 8th day, it's the 8th day. You have to have the circumcision on the 8th day. But, if technically you could have done the circumcision a day earlier or a day later, you couldn't do it on Friday. So it says, Rabbi Yeshua Heschel Ashkenazi, if a wedding you don't do on Friday, and the only reason you do bris milah is because you have no alternative, then you're required on Friday to do bris milah first thing in the morning. And if you postpone bris milah till later, it's an avera. And therefore I say as follows, even if somebody had a big accident, and for whatever reason the male couldn't make it in the morning, let's say the male was tied up, the male was kidnapped, the male was held hostage, and he shows up an hour before Shabbos, do the circumcision, but you can't eat. You can't eat. What do you mean, but he couldn't do it before? It's your problem. Your problem. You can't do it. You can't have a meal right before Shabbos. And some rabbi in Lublin, he's sitting there communing with God, meanwhile he's postponing the Milah, and it's like Chil Shabbos. And he ends off the broadside by saying there is nothing in this world more disgusting than to go into Shabbos with a full stomach. There is nothing more disgusting. That's why we have the Shiur Wednesday. If we have it Thursday night, people won't be able to eat Friday night. So we have Wednesday night, and this we give time to So you want to know what's going to be when we have the Shiur Thursday night? It's only once a month. It's okay. Okay. So, but this was the broadside that appeared in Lublin in the year 1865. Now, interestingly, even though Rabbi Yeshua Heschel Ashkenazi spares no criticism of this practice, the one thing he doesn't do is he does not identify which rabbi he's writing against. He doesn't say, who is this rabbi who's delaying bris milah? So in the Shalos Teshuvah, Shem U'She'eris L'Nefesh Chayim, in Siman Aleph, he writes that even though the broadside did not explain which rabbi he's referring to, nevertheless, it's absolutely clear that he's referring to Leibele Eiger, because as we're about to see, all of the letters written to Leibele Eiger about this issue appeared in the year 1865, which is exactly when this broadside came out. Plus, It's pointed out in the Sefer Shem Sheiros L'Nefesh Chaya. There's another Sefer. The name of the Sefer is Vayas Avram. Vayas Avram was written by Rabbi Menachem Mendel Chaim Landau, who writes that when he was a young man, he found a letter, another letter, from the same rabbi who wrote this broadside, Rabbi Shua Heschel Ashkenazi, who wrote another letter against Rabbi Leibele Eiger, saying, what's the man doing? You know what time he davened Shachris? He didn't daven Shachris 10 a.m. He didn't daven Shachris 11 a.m. He didn't daven Shachris 12 a.m. He didn't daven Shachris 6 o'clock a.m. He davened Shachris right before nighttime. And Rabbi Shua Heschel Ashkenazi was not happy with him. And he wrote a broadside against him. And the Vayas Avram reports that Rabbi Shua Heschel wrote to his grandfather, and that is identified as the Hagoyin HaKadosh Mitshechanov, that he should try to protest against Rabbi Leibele Eiger. Now, Rabbi Leibele Eiger was a very big tzaddik. And as great of a tzaddik as he was an even bigger guy. He was an even bigger Talmud Chacham. And as a big of a Talmud Chacham as he was an even bigger Anav. He was a very humble man. And he took this broadside very seriously. And he wanted somebody to come and defend his practice. So he wrote letters to all of the Rabbanim in Europe to see, could somebody please come to my defense? Because as you know, anytime somebody criticizes a rabbi, even if they criticize a rabbi l'shem shamayim, you'll have 1,000 people jump on the bandwagon and start criticizing the rabbi shaloi l'shem shamayim. And people made Rabbi Leibele Eiger's life miserable. Everybody was screaming, fighting with him, antagonizing him, bothering him, shepping him, and he had no respite. So, he turns first to his cousin. Now remember, Rabbi Kiva Eiger had a son, Rabbi Shlomo Eiger. He had a son-in-law, the Chassam Sofer. So Rabbi Kiva Eiger's son-in-law is the Chassam Sofer. His son is Rabbi Shlomo Eiger. Chassam Sofer had a son, Rabbi Shimon Sofer. Rabbi Shlomo Eiger had a son, Rabbi Leibele Eiger. Rabbi Leibele Eiger and Rabbi Shimon Sofer were first cousins. Rabbi Shimon Sofer was born in 1821. In 1844, the age of 23, he became the Rav of Matasta, which was one of the most prestigious cities. In 1861, he became the Rav of Krakow, one of the great cities in Poland. And Rabbi Leibele Eiger writes the following letter to Rabbi Shimon Sofer. He says, my dear cousin, my cousin, who everybody relies on you, everybody is soymich on you, you are the Sar HaTorah, the Prince of Torah in our generation. Please, please, you are my flesh and blood. Please save me from my antagonists. Says Rabbi Leibele Eiger, you should know that in my mind, my practice is so obviously correct. There's no question. Why? Because the Gemara says the following. It says Rabbi Leibele Eiger. This appears in the Michtav Sofer Arshas Teshuvos of Rabbi Shimon Sofer. And here is printed a letter that Rabbi Leibele Eiger wrote to Rabbi Shimon Sofer. And Rabbi Leibele Eiger says, look at the language of the Gemara. The Gemara says, Zrizim, Makdimim, Lemitzvahs. Zrizim, what does Zrizim mean? Zrizim means people with energy, people with alacrity, people with enthusiasm. Makdimim, they advance, Lemitzvahs, toward mitzvahs. It doesn't say Zrizim, Makdimim, Ha-mitzvahs. That people with energy, they advance the performance of the mitzvah. It doesn't say people with energy, they try to do the mitzvah as quickly as possible, as early in the day as possible. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say Zrizim, do the mitzvah as early in the day as possible. It says Zrizim, Makdimim, Lemitzvahs. They advance toward the mitzvah. You know what it means? That Zrizim wake up early in the morning to start preparing to do the mitzvah. When they do the mitzvah, they can do the mitzvah 5 days later. It doesn't say Zrizim Makdimim ha-mitzvah. Zrizim advance the mitzvah. They don't advance the mitzvah. Zrizim Makdimim limit. They advance toward the mitzvah. They wake up early and they prepare and they commune and they meditate and they connect and they're mistabek to Hashem. And when they're ready to do the mitzvah, they do the mitzvah. But apparently, says Rabbi Leibele Eiger, not everybody agrees with my reading of the Gemara. Zrizim Makdimim le-mitzvahs. And therefore, I ask you to defend me. Now, I have many proofs that I'm right, says Rabbi Leibele Eiger. I have many Gemaras that show that you don't have to do the actual mitzvah immediately, you just have to start performing the mitzvah immediately. But the purpose of my letter is not to get involved in a whole halachic debate, because I know that all the rabbis where I live, they all do the same thing. Now what's he talking about? Which rabbis? Hasidic rabbis. They all do the same thing. All of the Talmidei Baal Shem Tov, they were a part of this. They all would start preparing for Bris Milah early in the morning, and they wouldn't get around to it until very late in the day. Oh, and then says Rabbi Eiger, this is the real clincher. He says, I have a proof from the Gemara that you need to prepare and prepare and prepare and prepare. Because the Gemara in Masechta Brachos says, Chasidim harishonim hayishayim sha'achas kodem tfilasai u'mistam. The early Chasidim, now it doesn't refer to bells, satmar, etc. Chasidim harishonim, the early pious Jews, they would delay 1 hour and then they would daven. In other words, they would be shaya sha'achas, they would meditate for an hour and then they would daven. So says Rabbi Leibele Eiger, if the early Chasidim needed an hour to prepare for davening, and they were lived hundreds of years ago when the hearts were very strong, so just imagine how much time we need when our hearts are very weak and we're so distracted and we're so confused and we're so befuddled and our minds are so clogged up and we have things vibrating and buzzing and flashing all day long. How much time do we need to prepare for any mitzvah? So if the Chasidim Harishonim needed an hour, we need the whole day to prepare for every mitzvah. And that's my opinion, says Rabbi Leibele Eiger. And he says to his cousin, look, I know where you come from. People don't do this. And I know your father, the Sam Sofer, didn't do this. And Rabbi Eiger didn't do this. But look, there are different strokes for different folks. There are different ways of serving God. You guys like to do the mitzvah immediately. We like to prepare immediately. But please just acknowledge that the way we do things is a legitimate way of serving Hashem. And, says Rabbi Leibele Eiger, people are antagonizing me, people are bothering me, people are inciting me, so I just ask you, do me a favor, you're my cousin, we come from the same blood, we come from the same family, just sign your name that what I'm doing is legitimate. Don't write a whole long Megillah, you don't have to bring rayas from Shas, just sign your name. I sent the letter to many of the Gedolim in my locale, and says Rabbi Leibele Eiger, all the Gedolim that I already sent the letter to, they all agree to me. So all I ask you to do is just sign your name, that you agree that my practice is legitimate. Well, this letter Rabbi Leibele Eiger wrote on a Wednesday, Parshas Matos, Taf Reish Chafei, 1865. Very soon after the letter arrives at the house of Reb Shimon Sofer, the Abbezin of Mattersdorf, or at that time the Abbezin of Krakow, it arrives at his house on Shabbos. He's looking at the envelope. It says the name of his cousin, Rabbi Leibele Eiger, and he can't wait until Shabbos is over. He wants to open up that. The moment Shabbos is over, he rips open the envelope. He reads the letter and he starts responding immediately. He says to his cousin, my dear cousin, I wanted to save you the embarrassment. I wanted to save you the rumors that people are spreading around you. And I've come to try to help you out because it is well known that if you have an opportunity to do a mitzvah immediately, or you could delay it and do it in a better way, it's well known halachically that you should delay it and do it better. The Chumash Hadeshim says that, and the Chacham Tzvi says that. And therefore, there are many proofs in Shas that if you could do a mitzvah right now, or wait a little bit and do it a little better, Rav Shimon said you should wait and do it a little better. We'll see about that soon. But one thing I'm not sure about is, you claim in order to do it better, you have to do it later. But there are a lot of moilim that they claim they could do a good job right away in the morning. So if you're the only moil in the world, and you say, either I do it now, not so good, or later, much better, with more devekos, with more yira, with more ava, then I would tell you to wait. But you ain't the only moil in town. There are many moilim. Every other Jew is a moil. In this room, there are probably 50 moilim. Most Jews, they know how to do Milah. You're not the only moil in town. But, Says Reb Shimon Seifer, especially Bris Milah, it's not a good idea to delay it, because the longer you delay it, the more the person who doesn't have the Bris Milah is going to be an RL. What's an RL? Someone who's uncircumcised. To call someone an RL, it's an epithet, it's an insult. You, RL. An RL is despicable to a Jew. It's disgusting for a Jew to have an RL. Every second that we have a young baby has a foreskin, it's disgusting, it's despicable. In fact, the Gemara Nida even asks, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai asks, that why don't we do circumcision immediately when the kid is born? Why do we wait 8 days? And Rav Shimon Bar Yochai answers that since the mother is a Nida for the first 7 days, the mother would be sad if the Bris Milah took place at a time when she was usher to her husband. And therefore we delay it until she becomes permitted. But, says Rav Shimon Seifer, why was Rav Shimon Bar Yochai asking you should do a Milah right away? Because it's disgusting for a Jew not to have a Milah. But as soon as the 7 days are up, the first second you could do Bris Milah, you should do Bris Milah. The kid has to wait here. The poor kid is lying there like a guy, like an RL, like some kind of guy in the street, while this tzaddik is communing with God. Have Rahmanas on the poor kid instead of communing with God. Instead of meditating, have Rahmanas on this kid who doesn't have a Milah. First thing in the morning, you want to commune with God, you have all day, go into some phone booth and commune with your Creator. But not on the poor kid's expense. Kid's lying there as an RL. Kid's lying there without a Milah. So you'll say, says Rav Shimon, so you'll say back, but I'm a tzaddik. Shimon Seifer says, with Leibele, you're going to say, I'm a tzaddik. Leibele would say about himself, he's a great tzaddik. And for a tzaddik to do a Milah, that's a better Milah than for a regular male to do a Milah. Says Rav Shimon Seifer, where in the Gemara does it say that you have to be a tzaddik to do a Bris Milah? You don't have to be a tzaddik to do a Bris Milah. In fact, there's an opinion you don't even have to be a Jew to do a Bris Milah. There are no kavanos are necessary. No holy connections. No holy communions. No meditation. Milah, it's a scientific process. Bam, next. Like Parshas, they line up the chickens. People wonder, how do they do 1,000 chickens in 30 minutes? The answer is because this is not something that requires, your neshama to go up to Shamayim and connect to the higher being. Bam, bam, bam. It's a one-step process. Same thing with Milah. It's not it's not rocket science. The onus is on you, my dear cousin, to prove that a tzaddik's Milah is better than a regular person's Milah. And therefore, that is why here in Matastarf, where, by the way, says of Shimon Seifer, in Matastarf, all the customs of Matastarf were based on Go'inei Olam, dating back to the Panameiros, dating back to Marina Rab Gershon Chios, to the great Makubal, Marina Rab Leib, Ben Agon Rab Shmuel Chaim, and Marina Rab Ber Chassid, and so on and so forth. And also based on the psakim of my holy father, Sam Seifer. And you should know in Matastarf, the majority of children in Matastarf were circumcised by none other than the Sam Seifer. And you should know in Matastarf, when they had a Bris Milah, if Shacharis was normally 7 o'clock, by Bris Milah it was 6:45. And that's the minhag. The minhag is by Bris Milah, we do it earlier, not later. And let me tell you something. You know why in Matastarf the minhag was to do it early in the morning? Because of what I said before. Because it's disgusting for a kid to have his arla a minute longer, a second longer. And therefore, my dear cousin, you're a good man, you're a holy Jew. What can I tell you? You got to do Bris Milah early in the morning. But, here's the big but. What I hear is there are a lot of God-fearing Jews where you live, where you come from, that are delaying Milah until late in the day, referring to the Hasidim. So, let me try to come up with some kind of rationalization and limud zchus and bring the following raya that maybe what they're doing is okay. There's a medrash that says that in the Midbar, who circumcised the Jewish people? Moshe Rabbeinu. No. And then Aaron HaKohen did the Priya. So ask Rav Shimon Seifer, Moshe circumcised every Jew? Now, that probably there's a very long line in front of Moshe Rabbeinu. probably like the guy who was number 10, so he started in the morning. Probably there was some guy in the back of the line, he didn't get around to it until right before Shkia. Why did he need a bris milah for Moshe Rabbeinu? There are a lot of Milah in Klal Yisrael. I mean, Sheva Levi, they all did Milah Mitzrayim. But there was one Milah, probably there were a lot of Milah. So why did every Jew need a Milah from Moshe? Get a Milah from, I'm sure there was a crone back there in Mitzrayim who could have done the Milah. There are a lot of Milah back then. Answer is that if you can get a bris milah from Moshe Rabbeinu, it's worth the wait. Even if it means getting bris milah after Chatzos, even if it means getting bris milah close to Shiur. So from here, maybe we have a raya, says in Shimon Sefer, that if you could get a bris milah from a Gadol Yisrael, it's kedai and it's worthwhile to delay it, even if it means much later in the day. And therefore, my dear cousin, I know about you, you're a great tzaddik, and you're a great chassid, and you're a great mekubal. So maybe about you too, to get a bris milah from you, it's worthwhile to wait until later in the day. And therefore, I give you confidence and I give you encouragement that if anybody mocks you and anybody disparages you, stay strong. Signed, Reb Shimon Sefer. Now, does that sound like a ringing endorsement to you? Not exactly. I mean, he starts off by saying that in Matastor, for the last hundreds of years, they get up early to do bris milah. And the reason is because it's disgusting to have an arla. And he says, Olim of Zchus. What's Olim of Zchus? Olim of Zchus doesn't mean that this is recommended practice. Olim of Zchus means that a lot of Jews are doing it, and we don't have the strength to stop them, so we want to come up with some kind of explanation for what they're doing. But in no way is it a ringing endorsement. Well, if this is not a ringing endorsement, then you should have seen the other side of the letter. Because after Reb Shimon Sefer penned this letter, he turned the paper around and wrote another letter and qualified what he wrote in the first letter. And if you look, after this, he writes the following. My dear cousin, whatever I wrote on side 1 is definitely true. But I must tell you that I cannot hide my true feelings. And that is, I'm not happy with what's happening. I even heard that some people are delaying bris milah until close to Shkia. And I heard the great God of Yeshua Heschel Ashkenazi now forbid a milah after Chatzos. And he said that no moyel could do milah after Chatzos. Says Rav Shimon Sefer, that rabbi is saying good. No moyel should do milah after Chatzos. My dear cousin, but you brought a raya from the Gemara. The Gemara said that the early Hasidim would wait an hour before they did a mitzvah. So you'd like to suggest that means that we who are so weak, we need all day to prepare for a mitzvah. Says Rav Shimon Sefer. Nice try, but no cigar. Says Rav Shimon Sefer. You know, why does the Gemara say the early Hasidim waited an hour before davening? And what happened to the later Hasidim? Says Rav Shimon Sefer, let me explain to you something. The early Hasidim waited an hour before davening. The later Hasidim didn't wait at all. They davened first thing in the morning. You know why? I'll tell you why. Because in the early generations, they had real Hasidim. And they had real righteous people. And they had real tzaddikim. And when they sat there like this, before davening, they were clinging to God. And they were communing with God. And they were thinking about love of Hashem. And they were thinking about fear of Hashem. But in our times, in the times of the later Hasidim, you know how many phonies there are? You know how many hooligans there are? You know how many fake Kabbalists there are? It's almost like the good ones are batal b'shishim. And when you see people preparing like this, who knows what they're thinking? They're thinking that Rebbeinu Shalom, when are the Mets going to win the World Series already? When are my stocks going to... They're not thinking about God. They're thinking about who nonsense. And they're shaking their hands and they're swaying back and forth and they're on a different planet. They're on Mars. They're not in Shamayim. They're who knows where. Maybe we don't even want to know what they're thinking about. So while the early Hasidim waited an hour before davening, we don't do that anymore. We don't delay a mitzvah even 1 minute. Because you're going to delay the mitzvah because you're really communing with God. But what about the next guy who's going to say, I want to look like a chassid. But who knows what's in his heart? And therefore we don't do these things anymore. And therefore it says Rabbi Shimon Sofer, let me tell you something. You know Rabbi Akiva, right? He was a good Jew. He was a kosher Jew, Rabbi Akiva. He was a nice Jew, right? The Gemara says when he davened Shemona Esrei, he started privately. When he started in one corner of the shul, he ended off on the other corner of the shul. He shuckled and he was marich. But when he davened with the tzibur, he was the first one to finish. Not the first one, he davened quickly. Why? Tircha de tzibura. What do we learn from here? What we learn from here is that a person needs to have appropriate behavior for the times they live in and for the situation that they're in. Which means that just because you do something publicly, or you don't do something publicly, doesn't mean you need to do it privately. Says Reb Shimon Sofer, Reb Leibele, you're a tzaddik goyin olam. But in our generation, to prepare so long for a mitzvah, you're erlich, you're straight. But what if some other guy with an equally long beard is going to say, well, if he's waiting 9 hours to do Bris Milah, and he's davening Shachris late in the day, I'll also daven Shachris late in the day. But I daven Shachris late in the day because I'm a lazy bum. But you can't do it anymore. You can't do it. Says Reb Shimon Sofer. Says Reb Shimon Sofer. A person has to emulate the ways of God. The ways of God are that no matter how great Hashem is, He limits Himself and He confines Himself to do what's appropriate for man. Same thing with a tzaddik. A tzaddik, even if his head is in the shamayim, even if he lives on a very high level, he needs to act appropriately with the people that he's with. And therefore, says Reb Shimon Sofer, we have no one better to learn from than my father, the Chassam Sofer, and my grandfather, and your grandfather, Rabbi Eiger. When did they daven Shachris? Did they prepare and daven late? They daven first thing in the morning. When did they do Bris Milah? First thing in the morning. And they were tzaddikim and go'inim that we don't have today at their caliber. And if they were so great and they didn't need to prepare so long, then it's hard to say that it should be recommended for any tzaddik today to prepare so long. And therefore, look, cousin, I love you. You're a good man. You're a big tzaddik. You want to do what you're continuing to do? Chazak ve'amatz. But if you want to know what my personal recommendation is that if in the early generations they needed an hour to prepare, not like you say that nowadays we need all day to prepare. Nowadays we don't. You want to prepare? You do the mitzvah, and then privately in your closet you could sit there and commune with God as long as you want. But to do so publicly, where people are going to learn from you and they're not going to understand what you're doing, maybe it's not the right thing. By the way, Reb Shimon Sofer said that it's well known that if you could do a mitzvah immediately or you could delay it and do it better, you should delay it and do it better. We once had a shiur many years ago, probably 4 years ago. I don't even know if it's on Torah anytime. It was on Parshas Vayakhel. And there was a machlokes between the Chacham Tzvi and the Radvaz as to if you have, let's say a guy's in jail, and they're going to let you out of jail 1 day a year. You remember this year? 1 day a year. You could down with the minyan either Yom Kippur or today. So the Radvaz said today. Today. And the Chacham Tzvi said, no, wait until Yom Kippur. And it was a whole machlokes. Is it better to do a mitzvah immediately, or is it better to wait and do it better? The Chassam Sofer himself, we brought many places. At least 3 places Chassam Sofer writes, the halacha is like the Radvaz, better to do a mitzvah immediately, not as well, than to do it later, better. And if you remember, the Chassam Sofer in his Hakdama to Chulin brought the following proof. Chassam Sofer said not only is it a machlokes between the Radvaz and the Chacham Tzvi, Chassam Sofer said it's machlokes between Abraham and Sarah. That when Abraham had the guests, so Abraham said, bring the bread! So what kind of bread are you going to bring? Abraham, kemach soilas. Abraham said, bring kemach. Kemach is coarse flour. Doesn't taste as good, but we can produce it quicker. Sarah said, no, soilas, fine flour, better bread. What happened? Sarah became a nida quickly, right? Because Malachim came, and Sarah reverted back to her young age, and she was persanida. She made the bread tameh, and Abraham served meat, but he couldn't serve the bread. Right? He served meat, he served what? He couldn't serve it because the bread became tameh. Abraham said kemach, Sarah said soila. Says the Chasam Sofer, that's what it means. Imein kemach. If you don't have the midah of zrizos, of kemach, do things right away. Don't worry, I'm not ready, I'm not prepared. Don't worry, my jacket's not on perfectly right, my tie is not perfect, I don't have the proper kavanah. You have a mitzvah, just do it now. But in 5 days, I can do it much better. In 5 days, you can also be dead. Now, the Chasam Sofer says, why is it better to do it now and not later? He says, it's not because... He says, not because a person might not be here in 5 days, because as long as you want to do a mitzvah, Hashem will consider it as if you did it. It's because if you delay doing a mitzvah, the Yetzer Hara is going to come and convince you not to do it, so you can't delay. Even if you think you could do it better later. So it's very interesting, in the bottom of the Sefer, of Rav Shimon Sofer, the Mechtav Sofer, he brings down different places where the Chasam Sofer personally writes that the halacha is like the Radbaz, that it's better to do a mitzvah immediately than to delay and do it better later. Okay. So Rav Shimon Sofer does not sound like he's that thrilled with the practice of his cousin, Rav Leibele Eiger. Well, Rav Leibele Eiger sent his letter to other tzaddikim. In number 11, in the Sefer Meir Inei Hagoyla of the, it's brought here a letter of Rabbi Yitzchak Meir, who is the Chidushei Harim, and the Chidushei Harim defends Rav Leibele Eiger's practice. He says, what's the problem? The Gemara says, Kol hayom kasher l'milah. You can do milah the whole day. It's just reason makdimim. Okay, but there's no isser to delay it. It's not usser. And this rabbi wrote on a broadside that a moyel can't do a milah after midday. It's very nice. You can write whatever you want on a broadside. You could predict the winning lottery numbers. You could write down what you think tomorrow's news is going to be correct. But no rabbi has the authority to say that a moyel can't do a milah after chatzos. The halacha is kol hayom kasher l'milah. A rabbi doesn't have the authority to make a decree that a moyel cannot do a milah after midday. Since when does any? You need roiv of the rabbanim. You don't have roiv. And says the Chidushei Harim, in order for rabbanim to have the authority to impose a decree, they can only impose a decree on their community. So you're going to have Litvishe Gedolim imposing a decree on Chassidish Moilim. It doesn't work. It's like the halacha that if you have one bezdin can only exert authority upon those who are under their auspices. If you have two batei dinim in a city, so those who belong to the other bezdin are not subject to the rules and regulations of the first bezdin. So the Chidushei Harim did not have a problem with the custom of Rav Leibele Eiger. Rav Leibele Eiger wrote to another gadol at the time, one of the most brilliant minds of the 19th century, none other than Rav Tzadok HaKohen. Rav Tzadok HaKohen Milublin, he lived from 1823 to 1900. And Rav Leibele Eiger really asked in a very modest way, in a very humble way. He said, first of all, am I allowed to delay the Bris Milah until later in the day? And are people allowed to give me the kivud of being the moyel if it's going to be causing them to delay the Bris Milah? Well, Rav Tzadok HaKohen said as follows. In my opinion, even though you should not delay mitzvahs, but my opinion is that if by delaying the mitzvah you're going to perform it in a higher way, in a better way, I paskin, based on the Chumash that it's permitted to delay the performance of a mitzvah to be able to do it later in a more preferable way. And then he says the following. There's a Gemara in Soita. Gemara says about the burial of Yosef, that why didn't the descendants of Yosef bury Yosef? Why did they leave it to Moshe Rabbeinu? The Gemara over there says it's more of an honor to their father, it's more of a kavod to have a gadol b'Yisrael like Moshe Rabbeinu do the mitzvah than for they themselves to do the mitzvah. So it says Reb Tzadok HaKohen, you see from here that having a gadol do a mitzvah is more honor to the mitzvah than even having a lot of people involved in a mitzvah. Now, Reb Tzadok says the following. It's well known that there are some places who say that even though you're supposed to do Bris Milah first thing in the morning, but some places can say that if by delaying the Bris Milah and later in the day, if more people are going to come, then maybe we could use the rule, B'roivam hadras melach, that even though it's preferable to do the mitzvah as soon as possible, but maybe it's even more preferable to have more people there. Well, if you can make the case that it's better to have more people there, then it's certainly better to have a gadol b'Yisrael there. And therefore, Tzadok HaKohen says, Reb Leibele, I endorse your custom, I endorse your practice. If you feel that you need to commune and meditate and connect with the Almighty before you need to do the Bris Milah, go ahead, commune your heart out. Make sure you do the Bris Milah before Shkia, but you're allowed to do that. Okay. One last tshuva. And the introduction is as follows. One of the great Oiskim of the Achronim, the Yeshuas Yaakov, Rabbi Yaakov Ornstein. And Rabbi Yaakov Ornstein writes in Hilchos Pesach, Siman Tafai and Zayin, that a certain Gadol asked him the following question. He is not able to say Hallel and eat the Afikomen before Chatzos for many reasons. The reasons are not given. Can he eat the night of the Seder, the Afikomen, and say Hallel after Chatzos? Now he doesn't say what the reasons are, and it doesn't say who asked the Yeshuas Yaakov this question. Well, in the Sefer, we'll close with this, the Shem U'Sheiris L'Nefesh Chaya. This is where we started. The Shem U'Sheiris L'Nefesh Chaya, the Hagoyin Reb Chaim Elazar Vax, was born in 1822. He was the Rav in Tanegrad, in Kalish, in Pietrikov. He was posed with this question from Rav Leibele Eiger. Rav Leibele Eiger finally turns to him, can I perform Bris Milah late in the day? Now, one of the major problems that people had with Rav Leibele Eiger is a lavush. Lavush says, anyone here have Bris Milah on Rosh Hashanah? No. Okay. It's okay. Don't worry. But if a kid is born 8 days before Rosh Hashanah, when do you do the Bris Milah on Rosh Hashanah? Do you wait until after Musaf? After Musaf, it's after Chatzos already. The Lavush says that if a kid has a Bris Milah on Rosh Hashanah, you do the Milah right after Kriyas HaTorah, because Chas v'Shalom to do a Bris Milah after Chatzos. So he said, Reb Leibele Eiger, here a kid's born on Rosh Hashanah. And we're all waiting for Tkiyah Shem. And we're all waiting for Musaf. We say, no! Do a Bris Milah! You can't do a Bris Milah after Chatzos! And you're just sitting there communing, and you're delaying Bris Milah until after Chatzos? How could you do such a thing? Well, says the Sefer Shem U'Sheiris L'Nefesh Chaya, Reb Leibele, not a problem. On Rosh Hashanah, it's very important to do the Milah before Chatzos. Why? Because if you're going to lay and daven Musaf, you may get distracted and you may not do Bris Milah. But Reb Leibele Eiger, what are you doing? Why are you delaying? You're delaying because you're preparing for the mitzvah. You're involved in preparing for the mitzvah. You're thinking about how to perform the mitzvah in the highest way. You're not going to forget to do the mitzvah. That's what you're involved in. You're involved in the preparation for the mitzvah. If you're involved in some extraneous thing and some side thing, then we're afraid you may get distracted. But if you're involved in the preparation for that mitzvah, you're allowed to delay the whole day. And then he says an amazing thing. He says, I want you to know that even though it doesn't say in the Yeshuas Yaakov, who asked the Yeshuas Yaakov if he's allowed to do Afikomen and Hallel after Chatzos, I'll tell you who it is. It's one of the great old-time Hasidic Rebbes, Rav Moshe Leib Misasa. And if you want to know what were his many reasons why he couldn't eat Afikomen and Hallel before Chatzos, his many reasons were he needed to prepare. And what did the Yeshuas Yaakov say? Yeshuas Yaakov said like this. Are you allowed to eat Afikomen after Chatzos, or is it just better not to? Now, Rav ben Azariah says you're not allowed to eat Afikomen after Chatzos, you're not yotzei. But we be'etzim hold like Rabbi Akiva, that you have the whole night. But it's preferable to do it by Chatzos, because it could be even Rabbi Akiva would agree to Rav ben Azariah that it's preferable to eat Afikomen and Hallel before Chatzos. It says the Shem U'Sheiris L'Nefesh. The Yeshuas Yaakov told Rav Moshe Leib Misasa that since it's only preferable halachically to eat Afikomen before Chatzos, you who have a preference to do it after Chatzos because you want to prepare, you're entitled to violate the preference of doing it before Chatzos for your preparations. So says the Shem U'Sheiris L'Nefesh. If even when there's a halachic preference to do a mitzvah before Chatzos, the great Yeshuas Yaakov said that you're allowed to violate that preference in order to prepare for a mitzvah, then by Bris Milah, where there is no halachic preference to do it before Chatzos, all there is reason active in the mitzvahs, If you, Rabbi Leibele, feel that you need to prepare for the mitzvah, you would be entitled to delay the performance of Bris Milah until after Mitzvah. Let's end with the following. Says the Sefer Shem Usheres L'Nefesh Chaya. I want to tell you what I heard from Rabbi Cheskel Mikuzmir. He told me the following. Let's say a kid is born on Shabbos. Do you do Bris Milah on Shabbos? Yes. My bris was on Shabbos. We did a bris on Shabbos. You do Bris Milah on Shabbos. Why? Bris Milah is Lecha Shabbos. What if you need to make a knife on Shabbos? Could you make a knife on Shabbos? So Rabbi Lezer says yes. Rabbi Lezer says, in Parak Rabbi Lezer de Milah, he says you're even allowed to cut wood to make coals to make a knife. You're allowed to cut wood to make coals to make a knife. Because Rabbi Lezer holds, Machshirei Milah Doicha Shabbos. Even the preparation for Milah is Doicha Shabbos. But we don't paskin like Rabbi Lezer. We paskin only the Bris Milah itself is Doicha Shabbos, and the preparation for Bris Milah is not Doicha Shabbos. The Gemara says that in the city, there's one city in Eretz Yisrael that they went like Rabbi Lezer, and no one in that city ever died early. In that city, they prepared, not only did they do Bris Milah on Shabbos, they even did preparations, and they violated Shabbos in the preparation. And in that city, nobody died early. Very strange. They didn't die early? How's that? But we don't paskin like Rabbi Lezer. We hold that if someone prepares for Bris Milah on Shabbos, it's Chil Shabbos. And why would it be that nobody in that city died early? Put that aside for a moment. Says the Shem Usheres L'Nefesh Chaya, I'm going to prove to you now that preparing for the mitzvah is not a preparation, but it's part of the mitzvah itself. And therefore, as long as you start preparing first thing in the morning, that's like starting the mitzvah immediately. And the proof is like this. Hashem comes to Avraham Avinu. I want you to take your son, your only son, your beloved son, and bring him to Har Moriah and shecht him. So Avraham Avinu wakes up early in the morning and he saddles his donkey first thing in the morning and he starts cutting the wood. Avraham, what are you, Chasida Shareba? If the mitzvah is to shecht Yitzchak, so you should have saddled the donkey before the morning. You should have cut the wood before the morning. So when the morning comes, you could do the mitzvah immediately. Why is Avraham Avinu first starting to prepare in the morning? If the mitzvah is the Akedah should be done first thing in the morning, and all the preparation should have been done before the morning. The answer is, you see from here, that when we say Zriza Makdimim L'Mitzvah, it doesn't mean you start the mitzvah right away. It means you start preparing right away. And that's why Avraham Avinu, first thing in the morning, he didn't do the Akedah. He woke up early and he saddled his donkey. He woke up early and he chopped the wood. Because not only is a mitzvah the mitzvah, preparing for the mitzvah is also the mitzvah. And therefore, Leibele Eiger, people have complaints against you, you should do Milah first thing in the morning. You are doing Milah first thing in the morning. You're preparing. People have complaints on you, you're not davening first thing in the morning. You're davening first thing, you're preparing for that. So said Rabbi Cheskel Mikuzmir, why do some people say that only the actual Bris Milah is Lecha Shabbos, and others say even the preparation for the Bris Milah? It depends on your level. It depends on your madrega. People on a very, very high madrega, by them, not only is the mitzvah holy, the preparation for the mitzvah is so holy, it's like the mitzvah itself. Who is on such a level? Avraham Avinu was on such a level that by him, even the preparation for the mitzvah was imbued with such holiness that also was part of the mitzvah, and that's why he began that first thing in the morning. Who else was on that level? Rabbi Eliezer. And all the people in Rabbi Elezer's city were on that level. They're on such a high level. By them, they were doiche Shabbos, even with preparation, because by them, the preparation was on the level of the mitzvah, and that's why nobody died young in that city. But for regular people, for people like me and you, the mitzvah is the mitzvah. The preparation for the mitzvah is only hachana. So when we get up in the morning, you have to daven first thing. When we get up in the morning, you have to do Milah right away. Does that sound like a ringing endorsement for Leibele Eiger? I don't know. If Leibele Eiger was on the level of Avraham Avinu, then maybe it's acceptable. It was intended to be an endorsement for Leibele Eiger. But again, if you want to know bottom line, halacha l'maisa is very clear. It says in Shulchan Aruch, Zrizim makdimim l'mitzvos. That means you wake up in the morning, you daven right away. You do Bris Milah right away. Especially, you have to know, there's something called Zman Kriya Shema. You come to Shul Shabbos morning, I don't care if you're in Shul 10 hours. If you don't say Shema before the Zman, you blew it! You blew it. You messed up everything. I don't care if you're in Shul the whole day. You could say every single mizmar and pismoin and song and hymn, you could be the last one out. One thing you need to know, before anything, you need to look at that calendar. 9:04 is Magen Avram, the Gra is a little later. You better say Shema before that time. Otherwise it's Ma'uva Shena Yechalistik. Yeah, but I'm a holy Jew, I started preparing before. If you're like Avram Avinu, then maybe we have something to talk about. But for regular Jews like me and you got to do your mitzvahs right away. First thing, but I'll do it better later. It's the Yitzhahara. You do it better later. You do it better later. You may not be around later. You may not get to it later. You may forget about it later. But bottom line is, this was a very interesting practice of Rabbi Leibele Eiger. He was a great tzaddik. He was on the level to be able to elevate not only his performance of mitzvahs, but even his preparation for mitzvahs, which took quite some time. But for those who are not on such a high level, first consideration is make sure you get your mitzvahs done on time. Zrizim makdimim l'mitzvahs. Have a great evening.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.